Hello, I am Stephanie Forbes from Indigo Perspectives, and this is my friend Maureen Lorty, and we are going to talk today about her empowered birth story because I feel it's very important for other women to hear other people's empowered birth stories, because as we see on TV, birth is a traumatic, fearful, crazy, intense experience, and it has been sort of conditioning us over lots of years to fear it, and that can affect our mindset going into it, which can affect the outcome and challenges that we may experience. So hearing empowered birth stories, you get to hear other people's perspectives on how beautiful it can be and how natural it can be, and how natural it is. So I like to share information like this to help empower others. Not to say that anybody else's birth experiences are less than or better than, but basically to know that, you know, there's options, there's mindset, and all the different things that encompass having a beautiful empowered birth experience. So Maureen here has had a birth experience, a lovely, lovely birth experience. So I wanted to talk to you today about that. So maybe just give us a little bit of background on how you maybe prepared for your birth, and what kind of things that you learned about, or discussed with your partner or whatever, for your birth experience.
Sure. So thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
I would just like to start off by saying an empowered birth could be anything. Maybe for some women an empowered birth is in the hospital. Maybe it is at home. Okay, that could look many different ways. I'm going to tell you about my empowered birth. And I just like to kind of preface it with, it's an empowered birth can be anywhere, as long as you feel that you have kept your power and you are in a sacred space that you would like to bring life into. So I would just like to start by prefacing with that.
I love that.
So for me, that empowering moment that I thought of, that I had hoped for, was at home on a mountaintop community that is full of very beautiful, natural based human beings. And so that is kind of something that I saw my girlfriends doing. It was something that was kind of more of the norm for me. I know it's not necessarily the norm everywhere in all societies, but it is quite normal where I was birthing. So I knew it right away before we had conceived. And we also did a practice called conscious conception. Thank you, Bill. And conscious conception is basically just that we decided that we were going to conceive in a very conscious way. So it wasn't, after we drank a bottle of wine, it wasn't in the heat of the moment of like, let's have a baby. It was something that we talked about, that we planned. For us, we set crystals around the room, we saged, we cleansed the space, and we really were conscious about bringing a new life into this world.
That's
that was
beautiful.
Something
I've never
that
heard anybody say that before.
Yeah, this idea of conscious conception is, everything is energy, right? So the energy that we put into conceiving the child must have some effect on his or her life, right?
Yes,
so
exactly.
That was something that we did without really knowing, but it was just felt sacred to us. And that was a beautiful part of the process as well. And when we found out we were pregnant, we discussed it, and for me, that was something I felt really strongly about. I think that there were many things that I kind of had to help my partner with, kind of getting behind. I really turned into mama bear right away, and I did a lot of research on all of the surroundings of birth, and I was really clear on what I wanted. So I think at about week 30, we started to do hypnobirthing lessons, which hypnobirthing, you would kind of consider it strictly breathing exercises for when you're birthing, but it was a lot more than that. It really helped my husband to understand what the birth process was, so he could really understand things like oxytocin. When anyone is in pain, but especially in birth, what we're needing is oxytocin.
Naturally.
Yeah, naturally induced oxytocin. So that could be kissing me, hugging me.
Nipple stimulation.
Something
I
sure.
learned. I was like, wow, well, that's easy to incorporate.
Yeah, it was just basically the feel-good hormone. So he knew that when I was in pain, he would, get out the Tibetan bowl. He would play my birth playlist. He would hug me. He would say, "You're amazing. I love you so much. The baby is coming. You're doing such a great job."
Being a part of that empowerment.
Being a part of that empowerment, and knowing that that's exactly what I needed when I was in those really intense moments. And there was a moment in the birth where it was something that he just did, but for me it still sticks out in my head. It was like I was listening to my birth playlist, but my phone was a bit far. I couldn't move in the moment. I was just in bed, breathing, doing my hypnobirth breathing, and all he did was he moved the phone closer to me so I could hear the song that was playing. And I think he just did it because he was moving something. It wasn't like, I'm gonna move it but he did it, and that moment stuck out for me because I was like, oh, okay, I could hear the music, I could get refocused, and it was just those little moments of feeling really loved. But again, with the hypnobirth, I also learned about the phases of birth. So I knew that moment where you feel like you're about to die and you can't handle it anymore was the moment that you're about to meet the baby.
Yeah.
So when that moment hit, I was like, okay, I wasn't in fear. I never felt even one moment of fear. Because I knew the physiological way of birth. So I knew, okay, I'm about to meet my baby. So yeah, this is crazy, but we're almost there.
Yeah.
And my husband could know that as well. So that really helped him to help me better, because I could just be there in that moment and go through the process.
Can I pause you for a second and talk about the breathing part? Because I know that like in movies and in like Lamaze and stuff like that, they teach you like this short, and I never resonated with that breathing. I thought I would probably pass out if I tried to breathe that way.
Yeah.
It never felt right to me.
Yeah.
So it might have been something I read when I was pregnant or whatever, but it was like I knew that I needed to breathe in from my stomach.
Yeah.
Like not just here. It had to be
Well, you want to
here.
send the baby oxygen, right?
Exactly. So it felt very strange to me, and I always wondered, why do they teach people to breathe that way?
Yeah.
It just doesn't resonate with me. So the hypnobirthing, I didn't take that, but what did you learn? Like, how was it that for you to breathe?
It's interesting because I was doing the hypnobirth breathing before I knew it was hypnobirth breathing. I love to do Wim Hof. I love to do 4-7-8, where you hold the breath. And as soon as I got pregnant, I knew I couldn't do that anymore. So I looked for other kind of vagus nerve stimulating, calming breath work. And it was simply in the nose for 4, out the mouth for 5 or 6. The exhale just needed to be longer. So I was doing that as morning breath work anyways.
Okay.
And then I took the hypnobirthing course, and I found out that in the first phase of birth, that's exactly what you would do. You would do in for 4, out for 5 or 6, depending on how long you can exhale. And then when you get into the second phase of birth, you do what's called a J breath. So maybe you're pregnant right now, and so this is a great tip. The J breath is something that you could also practice when you're pooping. But it's basically imagining the inhale can be however through the nose, and then the exhale is like a J. So you're imagining it going down your body and kind of out through that area. So you could practice that while you're pooping, which is kind of what I would do during pregnancy to have that same kind of feel, because that same kind of push is like what happens when you're going into that second phase of labor.
Okay.
So those were the 2 breath works that I really kind of trained, and through my labor, that's all I did. That's all I could do because the labor was very intense, and I can get to that in a second.
Your belly is rising when you're breathing in.
In for 4, and I would just imagine sending all that oxygen to the baby, and then out for 6. So you're not only really filling yourself and your baby with oxygen, but you're also calming the vagus nerve through that long, loud exhale.
Well, and that imagination and that intention is also very powerful.
And meditative, right?
Yeah, like meditative, and it keeps you focused on the work that you're doing, and then there's all of the time people are, well, not all of the time, but sometimes people are like, oh, I want to have my whole family in the birthing room, and I was always like, that is very distracting.
Yeah.
It takes you away. You're worrying about what they're thinking. Oh my God, my father-in-law is seeing me, like, and I feel like those kinds of things are just, they're very personal, right?
Yes.
And you want to be focused on what you're doing and not on the external and all how everyone else is feeling or how you're being perceived or what. So, yeah. So what did that look like for you guys?
So, yeah, we had thought about that, and I think I knew I wanted women. I knew I wanted to be surrounded by women. But I also knew, as much as I love my mother-in-law, that wouldn't be a good idea.
Yeah.
So I did have a few neighbor friends that I asked to be around, that we notified when I went into labor. And in the end, Tal never called them. Like, my husband never called on them to be there. He just felt like it was just a beautiful, quiet moment for us, and they came kind of in the afterbirth. But basically what happened was, so leading up to the birth, I will just say this as well, I knew I wanted a home birth, and I knew that there's a lot of power in visualization. So when you're pregnant, a lot of women like to tell you their trauma birth stories.
That's true. Yeah.
Especially, where I'm from, the culture is very different, and the birthing stories that I heard were very traumatic. So I kind of listened to those, and then I think at about week 36, I would just tell someone, I would love to hold space for your traumatic birth story. I'm about to give birth, and that's my main focus. So if we could talk after, when I'm fresh and postpartum, if we could talk after, that's great. So what I did was I was very clear. I had everything printed out of what I wanted done in the hospital if I had to go, what I don't want done in the hospital mainly if I had to go. I had a hospital bag packed because we do live on a mountain. It would be a little bit of a longer drive. So I had everything packed. I was very clear with my husband on the procedures that I did not want and how sovereign I wanted that moment to be, in case I couldn't speak for myself. And then at about week 36, I put it away. He knew where everything was. I stopped listening to traumatic birth stories, and I only focused. Every day I told myself, this is where I birth.
Oh, and that's
home is where I birth.
Yes, and that's an empowering act too, is like setting up those boundaries of like, I don't want this in my space during this process. Yeah. And a lot of people don't feel comfortable setting that stage with people because, what if they are offended that I don't want to hear their, so what's most important is what you're doing for you in that moment and in that space.
Well, and as soon as you're pregnant, you have to set a lot of boundaries. I mean, you really do become mama bear. So I set those boundaries. And then I had a meeting with my midwife and the women that I thought would be around for when I birthed about a week before I gave birth. And my midwife said, okay, what do you want your birth to look like? And I talked them through exactly what I wanted my birth to look like. It was a little more intense in the end, but a week later, after I had given birth, she said, I cannot believe a week ago we were sitting here and you told us exactly how you were going to birth, and then you did it. And she said we should have filmed that for a home birthing video because that was like textbook home birth. And what I will say, like hypnobirth breathing. And what I will say is that my birth was so intense that all I could do was focus on my breath.
Yeah. Yes.
That's all I could really do in that moment. So people said, wow, you breathed for 11 hours. Don't we all breathe for 11 hours, 24/7?
Some of us, not really.
Right. So I consciously breathed for 11 hours because that's literally all that I could do. That was my anchor, which is also great about breath. It can really become an anchor. So I started going into labor. I think I went into labor probably earlier, but because my body was so strong, I did a lot of swimming, a lot of walking, a lot of strength training, a lot of yoga. So I was quite strong going into my birth, and I knew I had to be because I knew that it was going to be an endurance of body, mind, soul.
Well, and you have to be an active participant in your birth experience, whereas sometimes we're kind of taught that, or what's portrayed to us is the doctor knows everything about your birth. You just are there and it happens and you do what they say.
Yeah.
And so that takes away from your self-empowerment right there when we externalize how our birth is going to be. So you were like, this is mine. I'm taking action. I'm setting my boundaries. I think that's beautiful.
And I guided it with my son, and everybody else went with it. That was the thing, right? Is that I was not really in control. I was along for the ride, but my free will and my empowerment was in myself. My midwife was not a saint, okay? She was amazing. She sat with compassionate eyes, but there was not one vaginal check. She was checking the heartbeat as much as she could until the very end, but she didn't touch me. It was me and my son.
And you were okay with that? Like,
and I had asked for that. I said, if you don't need to touch me, I don't want you to touch me, especially vaginally. I don't think that unless there's a reason, of course.
Yeah.
So that's fine.
Very invasive.
And I also knew that if she said we have to go to the hospital, that we were going to the hospital. She knew as much as I didn't want that, but I also knew that I had to trust her, that if that's what she said, that's what we would do. I have my list, and it was like a complete surrender. Yeah. Because then you really are kind of relying on, the people around you in that space, because once you go into labor, there's not much you can do or even communicate too much at that time.
Right.
So I remember watching home birth videos. And these women would go for walks in between their contractions. They would go for a walk around the block. One woman was eating a charcuterie board. Oh. I remember looking at my midwife being like, where are my breaks? Where's my charcuterie board? Because it wasn't like that. I started going into labor, I think a little bit before. I didn't notice a mucus plug. I didn't notice my water breaking. I'm sure I was probably in labor for longer, but because my body was strong, I don't think I really felt it like maybe someone who wasn't training, or,
Yeah.
you know, for me, it just felt like my body was like tight and pregnant, but I think I was already having the Braxton Hicks and I just didn't notice it too much. So at about 2 in the morning, I started to feel uncomfortable. And about 5 in the morning, I woke my husband up and was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I thought, you know, let him sleep. Even as I'm going into labor, I'm like, let him sleep.
Well, there wasn't much he could do unless you actually needed him.
Yeah. So then he woke up and he started to kind of time everything of the contractions and the breaks. And so we saw that the contractions were 4 minutes long and the breaks were 1 minute long.
Oh.
For 11 hours.
Oh, wow.
So it was like right off the bat. So he called the midwife, and the midwife's like, I don't think you're doing it right. Do it again for 30 minutes because that doesn't sound right. So he did it again for 30 minutes, and he called her and he said, listen, 4 minute contractions, 1 minute breaks. By the time I would go to the bathroom and come back to the room, I was already like on the way to the bed in a full contraction and had to rely on my husband to help. And so he called her again, and she was like, said a few choice words and said, okay, I got to be there. I am on my way. And then from there, it was just all I could do was listen to my birth playlist and breathe. And my husband was, you know, filling the pool and playing the Tibetan bowls. But I remember just really wanting him around. I would get annoyed, like when the midwife came and he would talk, I was like, I need you with me.
Yeah.
So I think that's maybe where I would have loved to have someone else that could have helped with those things, but it just felt very intimate that way. So that's just the way that it happened. And my midwife basically sat on the couch and meditated and looked at me with, you know, very caring eyes. I will always remember the way she looked at me, kind of helplessly, right? Because there I was just going through everything. I was throwing up. I couldn't keep anything down. Things that I thought would feel good, like a shower, or there was like a scarf thing that my husband tried that I was like on my hands and knees and he would wrap a scarf and it kind of relieved pressure. Didn't like it. Didn't like the shower. Really just wanted to be in bed with the TENS machine on my back without anyone telling me to move. And that's the other thing is people were like, well, didn't you want to go to the hospital? And I was like, well, to go to the hospital or to get an epidural or to do any, like I would have had to have moved. And I did not want to move. So I was like, this is how it's happening.
So you said you were on your back? Or
I
had the TENS machine
I had
on
the
your
TENS
back?
machine on my back. I was mainly kind of in a child's pose with a pillow on my belly for a lot of it. And the TENS machine felt really good. And I didn't think it was going to feel good. And it felt really good because it kind of distracted me a bit. It like brought the sensation elsewhere.
So the TENS machine is like electrical, right?
Yeah,
like
and it's like tensing and relaxing your muscles, and that felt nice because it was like a massage for my lower back, but it also brought my awareness away from the intense pressure in my pelvis. And I was never worried because I never felt fear, which was so cool. I always felt him kicking. I felt him kicking the top of my ribs. I felt him moving, and I just remember kind of being in betwixt and in between worlds and just talking to him and just knowing like he was feeling really calm and I was feeling also kind of calm, but also, you know, like what is going on. I didn't feel calm, but my husband and my midwife said like I was sure I was screaming, and they were like, you were so quiet. My neighbors had no idea that I was even giving birth. Until they saw the sign, which I will talk about that after, which is kind of funny. But anyway, so, and then at about the 10th hour, I started to feel that kind of need to poop, that like pushing feeling. So I remember telling my husband, I gotta get in the pool. And he was like, okay, we're gonna set it. And no, like, I gotta get in the pool now. I have to get in the pool now. So they took me to the pool. And again, anytime you need to move, it's super uncomfortable. So I was in the pool and I was leaning over the pool and I felt actually a great relief. And I don't know if that was the water or that I entered the second phase of birth where things just felt different.
Yeah.
But I switched to that J breathing.
And it all goes together.
Yeah. And that's kind of where I felt more out of control. Like I was like, I'm tired. We've been doing this 10 hours. I didn't know that I had been doing it 10 hours, but I was like, I'm ready to be done. Just because of the intensity of like 4 minutes of contractions, 1 minute of break for so long. So I knew that I was closer to the end, and then just the feeling of pushing was more and more. And I kind of felt like I was rushing it. Like I knew maybe there was going to be some tearing and stuff, but I really didn't care. I was like, this baby's got to come out. I'm done. And that was kind of more of the moment where Tal was like face to face with me. My husband was face to face with me, and he was really like whispering things to me. And the only regret that I have is I wish I would have remembered the song that was playing as I birthed.
I was gonna ask you, what was your playlist?
My playlist was a mix of a lot of the hypnobirthing guided meditations that my teacher had given me.
There were words?
Yeah, there were words.
Okay.
Other meditations, but then also my favorite songs like Ram Dass songs, Trevor Hall, Rising Appalachia, like really peaceful, conscious, gentle music. Wordless songs like yoga music. There's one song called Opening, and the artist has lost me now, but just really beautiful music. And I wish I could have remembered also for my son to know this is the song that you heard entering this world. Like that would have been cool, but my husband was shocked that it happened fast. Like he thought once we got into the pool that we had hours there.
Yeah, really.
And it was quite
after
quick.
All that time already.
Yeah, so yeah, for him it was like he thought first birth, okay, days long, you know. He was really ready for the long haul, and I was like, no, we are finishing this now.
Grand finale.
So I was on my knees, and I knew I had learned in hypnobirth also, you know, laying on your back with your legs open and skin fully stretched is not a good way to birth. So I had learned in hypnobirth that on the knees, feet slight, so the knees are here, the feet are slightly out with a slight back arch, and that really opens the pelvis. So I was doing that more or less, and then my midwife said, okay, I can't feel his heartbeat anymore. He was just too low. I didn't panic. I could feel him moving, so I knew everything was fine, but she was kind of like, I can't feel his heartbeat. He's like, we got to get him out. So I said, no problem, still no panic. And she just asked me to lift one knee so that I was on one knee and one foot. And when I did that, he literally like fell out. And she was like, you got to catch him. And I was also I was also very clear with her that I wanted to catch him, or I wanted my husband to catch him.
Yeah.
I really wanted us to be the first people that touch him. That was important for me, and she was great about it. So she said like, you got to catch him. And so I caught him. And I remember pulling him out of the water, and I could hear him cry, and I knew the cry was a good sign. So he cried, I cried. I have a moment. Tal, I guess, took a picture of that moment. So I have that moment where we're both crying. And in my head, my whole body lit up. Every cell in my body lit up. And what I thought in that moment was, I can effing do anything.
I remember that feeling.
Anything.
Right after.
The moment I thought, I
just did.
If I ever doubt myself, physically, mentally, spiritually, I need to remember this moment.
I have stubbed my toe before and complained about it and cried about it, and I'm like, wait, I gave birth 2 times naturally. I can handle anything.
So I was really like, I can effing do anything. And I just did this in my mountaintop home, in my living room, without any white coat, without anyone telling me what to do.
Surrounded by love.
Surrounded by love, and almost no one. There was a second midwife that came. I didn't even know she was there. She was so quiet. So there was a second midwife in case baby and I both needed attention. And that was it. 2 women, my husband, and me and my baby in a pool full of blood and birth juices that we gave to our garden later.
That's amazing.
Out the window. Yeah, we have a video of it out the window.
Really?
And our garden used that as nourishment for a very abundant winter. And it was a beautiful, where we are usually November, end of November is rainy. And it was a beautiful sunny day. And it was like just a perfect moment. And then the women started coming over, and my husband had made a placenta art with canvas.
Oh, really? That's
and
one
hung
way
it
to
out.
use it.
Yeah, and hung it out on the fence outside, and that's how our neighbors knew. And they started to make bread.
This is the sign?
Yeah, they started to make bread. They started to make. We're hippies. They started to make soup, and they were like, she gave birth. And then it was like a few hours after that people reached out to Tal. And then it was cool because then he was the protector of the space, right? Because everybody wants to come. His mom wanted to come, right? Everyone wants to come and see baby and see me and bring food, and that's great. But he really then took on that role as the protector and said, and I was also behind the scenes saying yes and no. But he was really saying like, no, this is not the time. Yes, is the time. You can drop off. You know, thank you so much for the soup. I'm going to take it from you at the door, and I will let you know when she's taking visitors. And everybody was like super cool because they had given birth before and they knew.
It's so like primal and the way communities used to be, and how they should be. And I think we're actually taking a turn in society to moving towards that. And I think you sharing stories such as yours helps people to feel like, oh yeah, like empowered, like I can do this, I am meant to do this without all of these interventions. I mean, you know, there are some instances, of course, where medical intervention is required, but it's not the first. It's just like if my kids have anything wrong with them, if they have a sore throat, I'm not going to take them to the doctor. I'm going to, you know, establish what have we eaten, what can we detox, what do we need as nourishment, and all of these things before taking them to the doctor.
What is my body saying?
What is my body trying to tell me? What messages are coming through for me? What do I need to speak about? Or, you know, and we always discuss that first rather than just going straight to an external source.
And I also understand that can be really hard. I remember feeling a lot of fear with a newborn. So I understand also that can be really hard. I do want to say about the community that we had a really cool thing called birthing pots. So when someone gave birth, they would send it out in like a WhatsApp group, and then people would sign up, and every other day you got food, like a huge pot of food from a neighbor or a stranger or someone that I taught yoga to.
We need to do that here.
Yeah. So, and you would say if you're vegan, vegetarian, you love meat, you know, everyone would understand also if you're breastfeeding, not gassy foods and things like that. And so this was like the best. And every time a woman in my community gave birth after that, I would make them a birth pot, I would make them a cake, and I would make them a homemade diaper rash cream. And
that's
because
awesome.
I remember how useful that was. So every other day in my healing, we got a huge pot of like nourishing tomato soup, which is great for after birth, orange juice, you know, whatever you can think of. It was like fresh from everyone's gardens.
That is beautiful.
Yeah, it was really useful.
That's what I always want to do for people when they give birth. Is like, what can I bring you? What do you need? And I do that. I brought like herbal teas and food because like I remember the gift that I remember the most after I gave birth the first time. My friend brought over, and I think it was the day of. I had my baby at like 7 in the morning, and I was home right after that. And then my friend brought a barbecued chicken dinner. Like, she didn't live far, so it was still hot on the plate. And I was like, this is the best thing ever. Because who the heck is gonna, like, we don't want to do that.
No, and everyone's tired.
Right? Everyone's tired.
Yeah, everyone's tired. And like I did, you know, I had frozen food in the freezer, but nothing beats, like you said, you know, and your body is healing and it's producing milk and it's, you know, getting all of that extra blood out. And there's so many things that are happening, which also happen naturally and beautifully when you allow the physiological process of birth and baby and mom bonding. If there's nothing getting in that way, I mean, I think it was minutes after I gave birth that my midwife was like, your uterus is back down to the size of a fist. And it just did everything that it needed to do, right? So
and you had all the support.
And I had all the support. I did invest in a breastfeeding consultant, which I think was money well spent as well. And there's, you know, we could do like a whole talk on like postpartum care, which can also be done very consciously and very naturally. But that is basically, you know, my birth story. I'm sure I'm leaving tons of things out, but it really got down to I chose it and I visualized it and I followed through with it. And that's, again, like you said, it's not to say that things can go left. When I was talking to midwives in the beginning, there was one midwife that said something that stuck with me also now when I have other friends that are getting pregnant and giving birth. And she said, you have your birth plan, right? You have your journey in this pregnancy and in this birth, but baby also has a journey.
Yeah.
So if your baby's journey is to experience coming into this world through an emergency C-section or in a hospital, we also need to respect that.
Yeah.
So you can prepare for your journey, but you also have to know that this is a 50-50 thing. So I was also aware that if I go to a hospital, I really don't want to think of it as failing in my birth plan or failing to give birth how I wanted to give it. I really wanted to think of it as, okay, this is baby's journey and we're in this together.
Yeah.
So that was something that kept me from feeling the fear of like, nothing is going to be a failure, because it is a journey and there's two people in this. There's two beings in this.
Exactly.
So however, and actually I had too much protein in my urine. So I was taking tests even throughout when I was in labor. I was doing pee tests. Tal was laughing at me because I had this big belly and I was actually like mid contraction, and I would pee in a jug because I thought I was going to the doctor the next day. And I kind of thought that they would say, okay, there's a lot of pee in your urine. You need to, we need to get baby out, and then I wouldn't be able to do a home birth.
So what would be wrong with having that in your urine?
I'm not exactly sure, but baby knew it and was like, no, we're doing this at home. So before 7 a.m. that I was supposed to go into the doctor, I was already fully into my labor, and he was born at home. And honestly, we see that in so many things, like his calmness, his connection to water, because he was birthed in water.
Yeah.
He's a fire sign, but he really loves water. So, there's so many things that I really attribute it to how he came into this world is how he was in my belly, how the peace and the sovereignty that he felt, that energy, I think will carry him into this life.
It's a mutual experience. It's not just you birthing him, he's birthing himself as well.
Yeah.
So you're like the stage crew. He's
and I create this atmosphere for him to kind of come in.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing
You're
your story.
welcome. You're welcome.